former Congressman Mike Rodgers. I believe we have you on the line, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Congratulations, by the way, on your show. Fantastic. I hear nothing but great things.
Well, that is nice to hear. Thank you. It's just week 2, so we are thrilled to have you early into the show. I know you're probably, like everybody else, doing some Christmas shopping and other things today. But one of the things, that you, as I mentioned to everybody on the show, you were in charge of the Intelligence Committee. You understand the threats that America faces. And one of the things, Congressman Mike Rodgers, again, running for Senate in Michigan, one of the things that I think a lot of Americans find confusing, and maybe you can help us understand this, is that we saw the FBI director just within the last 2 weeks go before the Congress and testify that there are blinking red lights, that America faces threats to the homeland. We even saw warnings about being vigilant and aware in any sort of large gatherings around the holidays because the threats to America are so incredibly significant. Mike Rodgers, what do people do with that? How do people take these threats from the FBI, the threats that the FBI director explained? What are we supposed to do with that? Can you tell our listeners?
Well, obviously being vigilant is the most important thing. Be observant. That'll see something, say something, absolutely. And you just have to be more aware of your surroundings. You can't cave into the notion that, that's a pretty vague threat warning, as you know, Morgan, to say, well, every large gathering, that may be a little bit much. But what I believe the FBI is worried about is a couple of things. You have this perfect storm of brewing. You have certainly Hamas terrorists who the FBI believes has come across the southern border, and we don't know who they are or where they are. That's a huge problem, right? And so they could be lone actors, lone wolf actors. They could be part of a broader event somewhere. They just don't know, and that's what I think makes guys like me and women like you who know national security a little bit nervous on this. And then you have, obviously, with the proxy fighting across the Middle East, paid for by Joe Biden, by the way,
right.
with Iran cashing those checks and doing this proxy fighting, it opens up that threat matrix well beyond Hamas. Islamic Jihad, Al-Qaeda is likely to take advantage. Al-Shabaab is likely to take advantage. All these groups that we thought we had subdued or were working to subdue are looking for an opportunity to get back on the radar screen. And our porous southern border is what the FBI is talking about. And we need to be clear about
That's
that.
right.
I mean, it is a huge problem. And I talked to you, I think your listeners appreciate this story. I was talking to a very senior retired Customs and Border Protection officer who said, not that long ago, one of his guys went out, stopped a tractor trailer that he said it was stuffed full of about 200 people. There's only 2 officers at that scene at that moment, so everybody bolts. They catch 5 of them. Of the 5, 1 was on the terrorist watch list. So let's just extrapolate that, and say, oh my gosh, that would be, close to 40 people, and say, well, it couldn't be that many. How about maybe just 10% of that? That's 20 people who could be on the terrorist watch list.
Wow.
Running around the United States. And they were concerned. They said, we just don't know. That's what we don't. That's the concern about these FBI warnings. I wish the Biden administration would listen to the FBI warnings.
That's right.
Listen, the reason it's blinking is you have all this opportunity, all this anger. There's hatred being preached on our college campuses and on the way out. And that is certainly a recipe for disaster if we're not careful.
And I want to get to that when you talk about the college campuses. There's a new Harvard-Harris poll, which is just astounding about where young Americans are. There's so much that I want to talk to you about, and including your Senate race that you're running for. But I just want to stay on the national security beat for a second, because, again, for those tuning in, this is Mike Rodgers, former congressman from Michigan, who is now running for the U.S. Senate. Quick question, Congressman. Do you remember in the 9/11 Commission report, you would remember this more than anybody, I don't remember it off the top of my head, but I believe that we did discuss the open border and how that was, if we did not get our border under control, that we were worried about terrorist threats emanating from the southern border. Wasn't that in the 9/11 report?
They had referenced it. It wasn't one of the main focuses, but they referenced it, kind of a series of things like, hey, be watchful for this. And again, in the previous 4 years, that there was a great policy in place. Trump put in place this Remain in Mexico
Right.
provision, which takes away the incentive for you to give money to drug cartels and organized gangs and people who are trying to find and spot people to sell into human trafficking and drug dealing and gun running, right, to come up to the southern border. And that's what these people have been doing, if that's not organized by a nation state, by the way, which is probably a whole other topic. But so what
Right.
that did is it discouraged people from going through that process. Well, if I get in, I can't get in. They're going to turn me right around and put me back across the border. That's exactly the first start that we should do. When you have your FBI director saying, hey, listen, this is dangerous. And there are people getting through. You have the Customs and Border Protection saying, hey, we're catching people on the watch list, and we're not catching them all on the
Well,
terrorist
not only
list.
that, we're catching like components to make IEDs and potentially IEDs seized at the border. An individual was also loaded with an AK-47, other rifles. I mean, this does not seem like an economic migrant or somebody fleeing political persecution to me. I mean, we clearly have bad actors coming across this border. Congressman Mike Rodgers, on that note, right now the Congress is actually debating this national security supplemental, which would have funding for Israel, Taiwan, Ukraine. But Republicans in the Senate are really having a strong, firm hand. I listened to Senator Lindsey Graham on the morning shows this morning, and he was saying, listen, we are not going to be shoved into a bill right before Christmas that the Democrats force us into. We want real changes at the border. Do you think that is the right approach in the Senate? Is that the approach that you would take if you were inaugurated or sworn into the Senate in January of 25?
Well, when I go in 2025, Morgan, we win the state of Michigan, we will be in the majority in Washington, D.C. So it will be a different game. We'll be dictating the terms of that bill. We won't be begging to try to get the border protected, which we shouldn't have to do. I do believe that they don't have a lot of tools in their toolkit right now, with the administration being Democrat and the Senate being Democrat and such a slim majority in the House. It creates a whole bunch of negotiation problems. And so what they've done is say, listen, you want this Ukraine money. And by the way, Lindsey Graham has been all for the Ukraine money. But what I think he's saying is, come up here, make a plan, right? Tell us what the plan is on Ukraine. Oh, by the way, I can't spend another dollar knowing that your own agencies are blinking red with a terrorist threat crossing our southern border, and you refuse to do anything about it. I think that's probably, in the perfect world, you debate each issue separately and get it concluded. I just don't think they have that luxury, and I think this is probably the right tactic to try to get something done on the southern border. It's going to mean, if something happens, they're going to kill Americans. That's what they want to do. Remember, after the attack in Israel, it was death to Israel, death to America. That was the chant.
That's right. That's right. For those of you who are just turning in, this is Morgan Ortagus on the Morgan Ortagus Show. We have somebody that I've really looked up to and admired for a long time, former Congressman Mike Rodgers from Michigan, who is running for the Senate in Michigan. And I want to get to his race. By the way, Mike Rodgers, I don't know if you noticed, but I kind of copied you this year in New Hampshire. Well, you had in the I think it was 2016 presidential race, you were interviewing a lot of people, a lot of the Republican candidates on national security issues. We did that this summer in New Hampshire with Polaris National Security, a think tank that I founded. And so I would say, imitation is the best form of flattery. Hopefully you think so. I've often been inspired by your service.
Congratulations. Oh, my gosh, and I can't think of a better person to be leading those discussions. So thanks, Morgan, for doing that. I was aware of it, and I was you may not have heard, it was that loud, faint cheer coming from the great state of Michigan for what you were doing. Because, when people show up to be president or, a lot of what gets thrown at them is the international and foreign affairs work. Domestically, you can try to work your way through, your issue set. But internationally, a lot of times it comes at you. You don't get that choice, right? That attack on Hamas over Israel, I could go through a whole host of absolute horrific decisions by the Biden administration that got us there. But at the end of the day, that was foisted on. Now you have to react to it. And so I think having those conversations with you and Polaris in early primary states, really, really important.
Well, thank you, sir. Let's talk about, speaking of primaries, you are in a primary in Michigan. You are running for the United States Senate there. You'll have some competition in the primary, of course, but I've noticed that you have some pretty big endorsements this week. Senator Katie Britt, who will be on with us next hour, actually, she has endorsed you. My dear friend, love her to death, Senator Joni Ernst has endorsed you, and also Senator Caputo has endorsed you as well. So give us a status update. What is going on in your race for Senate in Michigan?
Well, Morgan, one of the reasons I got into this whole thing, my wife and I looked about a year ago over a cup of coffee and thought, everything seems broken. Everything. Washington, D.C. seems broken. Certainly the Biden administration taking us down the wrong path, not only domestically, but also internationally, setting us up for failure like you see happening really before our eyes today. And remember, I keep saying, and you say this too, that listen, these international foreign affairs decisions have consequences. Well, we're living the consequences right now. And I thought, sometimes we just don't have time for on-the-job training when you get back there. We have massive issues. I mean, we have failed to recruit for the fifth year in a row the number of Army soldiers we need to defend America. We have a literacy crisis. One of the reasons is 57% of high school seniors graduating from school can't read at the sixth grade level. That's an epidemic. China is moving out militarily, and they're using all the layers that they can do under one umbrella, from diplomacy to economic warfare to lawfare. They're doing it all. They're teaching their kids in the eighth grade quantum mechanics, and as I said, our kids can't read at the sixth grade level when they're graduating. These are serious problems that if we don't get our arms around, we are going to find ourselves in a lot of trouble in a very short period of time. And so I thought, man, we need somebody that can show up the first day. And why those endorsements from the Senate are so important is because these are just very strong conservative leaders on foreign affairs and domestic affairs. Joni Ernst, who was a lieutenant colonel and served in Iraq, and Katie Britt, who was with Senator Shelby, who saw how you are supposed to act to defend your country. These are just really important endorsements for us. And what we're seeing is this kind of coalition around, okay, you got to have one person who we believe can win in November. And all of these folks, and Tim Walberg, the dean of the Michigan delegation, great proven conservative, also endorsed, and the Police Officers Association of Michigan has already endorsed, and getting ready to announce a whole bunch of county sheriffs are getting ready to endorse. And all of that just shows that momentum, and everybody's starting to coalesce around, candidly, us, because they know we don't have a lot of time to waste. In the first day, think of it, I've already got at least 3 senators I'm going to pick up the phone and have a conversation with about solving problems.
Right. That's right. Well, thank you so much. This is Congressman Mike Rodgers, as I mentioned earlier, is running for the Senate in Michigan, long national security background. One of the things, Congressman Mike Rodgers, that I got to just tell you about this poll before we leave, because I find it astounding. You and I are both longtime national security professionals. So Harvard-Harris did this poll of what young people think about Israel and think about Jews. I'm just going to quickly read this to you because I think that this just shows the systemic rot in our educational system in this country. And something's got to change, Mike Rodgers. So 67%, according to this new Harvard-Harris poll, 67% of young Americans, these are people in between the ages of 18 to 24, believe that Jews as a class of people are oppressors and should be treated as oppressors. 53% believe that call for genocide of the Jews should be allowed. That's over half of our young people. 60% of young Americans believe that Hamas's murder of over 1,200 people, including, by the way, over 32 Americans on October 7th, can be justified by the grievances of Palestinians. And 31% of young people believe that Israel has no right to exist. I'm going to read that again. 31% of young Americans believe that Israel has no right to exist. How in the world do we deal with this with our young Americans, Mike Rodgers?
Yeah, we're going to have to get back to an education campaign. I'm not a conspiracy guy, but this year in and year out of graduating kids that can't read at the sixth grade level means even the top performing kids may not be all that top performing. And we are going to have a hard conversation in America about getting back to those values. You have people on these college campuses, professors, administrators, who are trying to set up this segregated politics
That's right.
of race that is going to cause us significant problems. One last percentage I'll give you, and I hear the music in my ear.
Yeah, that's our time to go.
I do. I know it. I just real quick, there was something around the order of 70% of people from 18, I think the age was 35, that said, in a conflict, would you serve your country? Almost 70% said no.
Well, we got to change that, Mike Rodgers. Thank you so much for calling in. Really appreciate it. Running for the Senate in Michigan.